Oxford Bookworm's Library, Stage 5. This Rough Magic by Mary Stewart. Retold by Diane Mowat. Read by Joanna Hall. Published and copyright Oxford University Press, 1991. CD 1. Chapter 1. The Magic Island. "And if it's a boy," Phillida said cheerfully, "we'll call him Prospero." I laughed. Poor child. But why Prospero? Oh, of course, because of Prospero in The Tempest. Corfu was Shakespeare's magic island in The Tempest, wasn't it? Yes. We've already got one character from the play here, Miranda. And her brother's called Spiro, which sounds a bit like Prospero, doesn't it? Miranda and Spiro are twins. My sister smiled at me and reached for the coffee pot. "More coffee, Lucy?" she asked. We were having breakfast outside in the sun, on the terrace of my sister's house on the beautiful island of Corfu, which lies off the west coast of Greece. Below the terrace, wooded cliffs fell steeply to a small sheltered bay, where the sea lay calm and still. From where we sat, we could not see the bay as it was hidden by the trees, but we had a wonderful view out across the sea. And to the north we could just see the snow-topped mountains of Albania in the distance. My sister Phillida is 3 years older than I am, and when she was 20, she married a Roman banker, Leonardo Forlì. The Forlì family had owned land on Corfu for many years, and Leo's great-grandfather had built an enormous house, the Castello dei Fiori, in the woods above the bay. Later, Leo's father had built 2 smaller, more modern houses on the cliffs on the north and south sides of the bay. The house on the northern side was called the Villa Forlì, and it was used by Phillida and Leo. The house on the southern side was called the Villa Rotha, and it stood above the big boathouse which Leo's great-grandfather had built. This villa was rented by an Englishman, Godfrey Manning, who had been there since the previous autumn. He was writing a book, Phillida had told me, and was taking a lot of photographs for it. The 3 houses were connected with the main road by the private road up to the Castello, and connected to each other by various paths through the woods and down to the bay. That spring, Phillida was expecting her 3rd child, and the heat in Rome was too much for her. Therefore, Leo had persuaded her to go to Corfu and to leave the other 2 children, who were at school, in the care of their grandmother in Rome. Leo, of course, was working, but he was going to visit Corfu at weekends whenever he could. Phillida had asked me to go and stay with her, and her invitation had come just at the right time. I'm an actress, and the play I was in, my first in London, had closed after only 2 months. I was feeling very miserable. It had been a bad winter, and I was tired, depressed, and seriously wondering, at the age of 25, if I should look for a different job. So it was wonderful to find myself on this magic island, with the sun shining brightly. It was far away from the cold of an English April. I sat back in my chair, drank my coffee, and enjoyed the peace and beauty as I looked out towards the distant snows of Albania. Well, Corfu is certainly a magic island for me, I said dreamily. Who are these Shakespearean twins of yours, anyway? Oh, they're Maria's children. Maria's the woman who works for us here. Miranda helps her mother here, and Spiro works for Godfrey Manning at the Villa Rotha. Maria and the twins live in the village. But I could see that Phillida had something else that she wanted to tell me. Someone very famous is renting the castello, she informed me. What? That huge old house? I said. Who wants to rent that? Julian Gale. Julian Gale? I sat up suddenly and stared at Phillida in surprise. Do you mean Julian Gale the actor? Yes, my sister replied, pleased by my excitement. Julian Gale had been one of Britain's finest actors for many years, and then 2 years ago he had suddenly left the theatre and disappeared. So he came here, I said. I knew he was ill after that terrible accident, but then he just disappeared. Yes, well, Phillida said. He doesn't go out, and nobody is allowed to go to the house, so I don't imagine that you'll even meet him. The Tempest was the last play he did, I said. He was wonderful in it. I remember crying my eyes out over the famous "This Rough Magic" speech. Is that why he came to Corfu? Phillida laughed. I don't think so, she replied. He was here during the war, and then he stayed on afterwards. Before his wife and daughter were killed in the accident, they all used to come here for holidays. He probably just remembered the castello when he needed to disappear. Just then, a young girl of about 17 came in. She was wearing a red dress, which went well with her dark skin and hair. She had come to take away the breakfast things. She looked at me curiously, and then she smiled. This is Miranda, explained Phillida. If you want to go swimming this morning, I'll ask her to show you the way. I'd love to, I replied. Phillida turned to Miranda. Will you show my sister the way to the beach when you've finished that, Miranda? Of course, Miranda said, smiling. The way to the beach was through the trees, and in a while we came to a fork in the path. The downhill path led to the beach, and the uphill one, Miranda told me, was the private path to the castello. Where's the other villa, Mr. Manning's? I asked. On the other side of the bay, at the top of the cliff, she replied. You can't see it from the beach because of the trees, but there's a path from the boathouse up the cliff. My brother Spiro works there. What about your father? I asked her. Where does he work? My father left us many years ago. He went over there. She pointed towards Albania. He was a communist. Nobody can travel to Albania, so we don't know if my father is alive or dead. Her eyes grew bright. But we have Spiro, she said. Well, thanks very much, Miranda, I said. Please tell my sister that I'll be back for lunch. I turned down the steep path under the trees. At the first bend, I looked back. Miranda had gone, But I thought I saw something red on the forbidden path to the castello.